What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video, and today we're going to be traveling to the Modern format and checking out the Esper Midrange deck for the Modern format. This is a take on the Orzhov Midrange decks that players are probably more familiar with. Of course, they were very popular during the Underworld Breach days of the Modern format, aka the last Modern Regional Championship season, where that deck was just better than anything else kind of going on, but Orzhov Midrange found a way to kind of lock in and beat up on those types of strategies. And while obviously the breach has been banned and the metagame has evolved kind of past that, the Orzhov midrange decks are still relatively popular, but Esper midrange seems to be more popular than the Esper decks. And, you get all of the good tools that exist in the Orzhov midrange decks while also getting access to some very powerful blue cards as well. And, who doesn't like playing with very powerful blue cards? However, before we get into the Esper midrange deck and we talk about the ins and outs and the kind of draw to actually playing this deck, even in something like the Modern format, if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos from me, where we talk mainly about the Modern and Standard format, as well as some other longer form videos for your viewing pleasure. So if that's something that interests you, please consider subscribing and ring that notification bell so you know when future videos get posted. It's a free, easy way to support me and my content. And if you want even more content, go ahead and check out the description down below. I have a link to my Discord server as well as my Twitch channel. You can follow me over on Twitch, where we've been playing quite a bit of the Modern format here, just because that is going to be what we're preparing for the regional championship season, as well as, of course, Edge of Eternity is coming out. Maybe we'll get into some standard there as well, since that'll be the next RCQ season coming up here very, very soon. You can go ahead and check out the Casual Spikes Podcast YouTube channel. You can follow over there and subscribe. And then lastly, I want to thank the sponsor of the channel, Manatraders. Manatraders is a monthly subscription service that you can use to rank cards on Magic the Gathering Online, such as the cards for Esper Midrange that you see here, and you can play them in different leagues, challenges, and other tournaments going on Magic the Gathering Online, as well as kind of playing with your friends, playtesting, whatever your needs may be. I think Manatraders is an awesome service. It really kind of stops you from having to spend a ton of money on Magic the Gathering Online to buy one deck, and if you decide that you don't want to play it, whatever the case may be, you don't have to worry about selling the cards to then try to hope to get enough money back to then go and buy new cards. You can just rent these cards for a lower fee online and swap them out at your leisure and then play whatever decks you want to play whenever you want. It's great as a content creator because obviously I can show and bring you guys a ton of different decks, but it's also really good as just a competitive player. You kind of get to pick and choose what you want to play, and then if you really like playing a certain deck, well, then you just hold on to it a little bit longer and play even more of it, and if you don't like it, you just toss it back and get you a new one. But yeah, go ahead, check out Manatraders' description down below. Use my code down there as well to get 5% off your monthly subscription should you choose to sign up. I do greatly appreciate that. Now let's go ahead and talk about this Esper midrange deck. So we talked about Esper midrange essentially just splashing blue for a lot of the really good blue cards that exist in the format here. But what's even the draw to playing just the Orzhov builds of this deck? Well, obviously, the best kind of card in most of the matchups here for this Orzhov/Esper deck is Ketramos the New Dawn. A 3-mana 4/4, Menace, Lifelink, Indestructible. Can't attack or block unless there are 7 or more cards in exile. That's just in exile total. And whenever one or more cards are put into exile from graveyards or the battlefield during your turn, you draw a card and lose a life. So this is not optional. You have to draw the card if something gets exiled from the battlefield or in the graveyard. But in general, this is kind of a really good payoff card to just kind of mess with your opponent's graveyard. That's kind of what this deck is in the business of doing anyway, with some of the cards it has available to it, as well as just being a source of card advantage and a really good closer nonetheless. Ketramos just kind of does a lot that these black-white base decks kind of want to be doing. And the combo that we're looking at here is Ketramos and Relic of Progenitus. So Relic is a 1-mana artifact. You can tap it to have target player exile a card from their graveyard, and you can pay 1, exile Relic of Progenitus, and exile all cards from graveyards, draw a card. So with at least 2 cards in graveyard, Relic of Progenitus ends up kind of drawing you 4 cards for 2 mana. You can pay for Relic, obviously tap it, have a player exile a card, you're going to draw a card from Ketramos, and then with the Relic activation of paying a mana, you exile the Relic from the battlefield, which is going to give you a draw trigger from Ketramos. You're going to exile all cards from the graveyard, draw a card from the Relic activation, and then exiling cards from the graveyard, as long as there's at least one in there, you're then going to get to draw another card from Ketramos. So it's a lot of card advantage here, and really Relic just kind of staying on the battlefield and just something that on your turn, you can then tap, make your opponent exile a card from the graveyard. Gets to be super annoying, but it does end up meaning something because you are building towards actually attacking with Ketramos. Plus, if your opponent interacts with their graveyard in any way, also a bonus there. But this is a way that you can kind of keep that in check, draw cards, and basically ensure that you're going to find a lot of your heavy hitters in this deck. Speaking of heavy hitters, there's also another combo in this deck that is really brutal here. We have Overlord of the Baelmerk. Of course, these Overlords have been super powerful in all the other formats of Magic. Here in Modern, we see Overlord of the Baelmerk quite a bit. A 5-mana 5/5 with Impending 5, where you pay 1 in a black. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you mill 4 cards, and you return a non-avatar creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. So obviously you want to play this for 2 mana. You end up putting this on the battlefield, you mill 4 cards, and then you have the ability to find any one of your creatures, or maybe this one of Teferi Time Raveler, and put it into your hand. So essentially, Overlord of the Baelmerk a lot of the time is going to end up replacing itself when you play it. The bonus is this is going to sit on the battlefield, not as a creature, but as an enchantment permanent. So it's going to sit on the battlefield, and you have cards like Thalia, Exuberant Shepherd, which are really good here, or Flicker Wisp, both cards that are going to exile it. Flicker Wisp on ETB will be able to exile a permanent, which also opens up a lot of tricks, especially when you incorporate Ephemerate, where if you just kind of like flicker, if you flicker a Flicker Wisp on your end step and you exile a permanent like an opponent controls, or you control that permanent is going to stay exiled until the next end step, meaning that it'll come back on your opponent's end step. Or if you do it on your opponent's end step, it'll come back on the end of your end step, etc. Whatever the case may be. And this kind of works out because you can like Flicker Wisp, like a Flicker Wisp, then Flicker Wisp number 2 comes back and gets permanently gets rid of something that your opponent controls. So it's really neat there. Thalia does kind of the same thing. Where whenever it attacks, it gets to exile up to 1 other target non-land permanent, and at the beginning of the next end step, that card enters the battlefield under its owner's control, and if it enters under your control, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Thalia. So this is a way that, again, you can flicker the Baelmerk, have it come into play, it's going to be a 5/5 creature, and you're going to be able to get another trigger on the Overlord to end up getting some cards. The only downside to Overlord is the fact that you don't have the option to not mill, so there's a lot of times where games come down to you need to be able to close it out, and you can't even really attack with your 5/5 because you only have like 8 to 10 cards left in your library, and attacking isn't really going to help you when you really don't need the cards anymore. You just need to be able to close out the game. So it does get kind of awkward, but this is like one of your best options of just being able to recur creatures that you need. It doesn't even need to get a creature from the 4 cards that you milled. It can just get one from your graveyard. So if you solituded earlier, or if you evoked a Solitude earlier, and it's like 3 or 4 turns later, you can go and pick up that same Solitude and put it back into your hand and get ready to exile another creature an opponent controls, which Solitude is a great option for all the creatures that exist in the format. Obviously, things can get a little awkward when you're doing a lot of milling with Overlord and you're trying to close out the game, but Solitudes are kind of gaining your opponent life because you're exiling their big creatures. It does get really weird, but nonetheless, like this is a great option for you, and really it only comes up maybe like a few times in the I don't even know how many matches I play with just the regular Orzhov builds. But, you know, we talked a lot about the cards that kind of just already exist in the Orzhov decks. Of course, they kind of tune their decks a little bit differently, where now they kind of like play a recruiter package and they're able to kind of get card advantage that way over playing something like Ketchamos even. But in blue, you do get access to the card Psychic Frog, which I think is probably one of 2 of the best creatures that exist in the format right now. A 2-mana 1/2 deals combat damage to a player, Planeswalker. You draw a card, discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Psychic Frog. Exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. Psychic Frog gains flying until end of turn. This card closes out games very quickly. It puts cards into your graveyard, so if you are able to kind of attack with like Overlords, you are able to kind of, you know, get free discards, I would say, with Psychic Frog, or even pick up additional cards, and you're able to get an additional counter on Psychic Frog. And the fact that you exile cards from your graveyard to give Psychic Frog flying, every 3 cards in your graveyard can equal 1 card drawn with Ketchamos as well, so they have some really powerful synergy together on top of just you actively wanting to activate that ability, so you can fly over your opponent's ground creatures and close out games very quickly. The other spells in the deck are pretty important as they kind of help you interact a little bit more and kind of make things really rough for your opponent here. Fatal Push, Thoughtseize, just the go-to 1-mana black interaction. Wrath of Skies is really interesting, especially with Boros Energy being fairly popular, as in you'll be able to pay like 1 or 2 mana and clear the majority of their board. Teferi Time Raveler is a really interesting way of interacting with your opponent as well. And then Ephemerate probably being the most interesting of the whole non-creature package of cards here. So for 1 mana, you exile a target creature you control, and you return to the battlefield under its owner's control. And it has Rebound, which means if you cast it from your hand, you exile it as it resolves. Beginning the next upkeep, you can cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. This is a way that you can nullify some of your opponent's removal on some of your creatures. Again, you have some tricks there with like Flicker Wisp, where you can like Flicker Wisp out on your end step and then actually take away a resource from your opponent. I actually had a game where I played against someone who was stuck on one land, and I was able to attack with like Flicker Wisp and then, you know, flicker it on my turn to then get rid of their one land and basically time walk them on their turn. So it was actually really cool. And this is like a few of the tricks that you can do. Of course, Ephemerate on an Evoke Solitude is going to have Solitude stick around. Even with like Emperor Bones, which is a card that we kind of glossed over, where you can exile a card at the beginning of combat on your turn. So this is another way you can draw a card with Ketramos, but you can also exile a creature from your graveyard, adapt it for 1 and a black, and then you can put it on in a creature that's exiled with it onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So that means it gains haste, and you sacrifice the beginning of the next end step, which means it would get exiled. But if you flicker it and it's your own creature, it's going to return to the battlefield under your control without that finality counter and stick around forever, basically. You could also then flicker your own Emperor of Bones to then be able to exile another creature from a graveyard and then adapt it again, and so on. So definitely gets really interesting there. And of course, even more interesting when you think of like Flicker Wisp shenanigans with Emperor of Bones, that sort of thing. Mana base, there's a Flood Farm Verge, which is kind of interesting, one of the Verge lands from the Duskborn set. We have a Meticulous Archive as well as a Shadowy Backstreet in here. I've seen some decks play like 2 Shadowy Backstreet. One's probably fine here. And then our usual case of Fetch lands and Shock lands. Again, for blue, you're going to be able to get Consign to Memory, which is probably one of the best sideboard cards in Modern currently. Celestial Purge, Strategic Betrayal, a new-ish removal spell from the Tarkir Dragonstorm set. Target player or target opponent exiles a creature they control in their graveyard. So it ends up kind of also getting to have you draw multiple cards because you're able to exile a creature they control and then draw a card. So it's going to be exile a creature, you're going to draw a card from Ketramos, and then exile their graveyard, draw a card. So just a lot of card advantage there. I mean, really, doing that and then drawing 2 cards is really sweet. White Orchid Phantom for the big mana decks, more Wrath of Skies. Clarion Conqueror ends up being a fantastic sideboard option in a lot of these white-based strategies. Another Teferi Time Raveler and Elishnorn, Mother of Machines. Another card that's going to be kind of sick if you're able to get it in play. I'm sure even like using something like the Emperor Bones to like get it back, and then like Phalia to like blink it and whatever, and all these other powerful ETBs that we have in here, like Elishnorn could just absolutely dominate those strategies as well as the ETB strategies of the format. And that is Esper Midrange for the Modern format. This deck is absolutely gas. I really do mean it that, you know, Psychic Frog is probably one of, if not the best creatures in the current format. I think it's between that or Flage, but Psychic Frog gives you a lot of card advantage on top of just being a slam dunk partner to Ketramos, on top of just an already really good Orzhov shell that, you know, ends up like drawing you cards. It has different ways of kind of cheating out its own creatures into play. One thing that we didn't mention here that I'll mention here now, you play cards like Witch Enchanter or Borgart Trawler that you can play as lands, and Flicker Wisp can exile just another target permanent, which means that if it exiles the Witch Enchanter that's a land or the Borgart Trawler that's a land, you can actually then cheat these out into play and get their ETB when they return, because they will return on their front side, which is really neat there. And of course, protecting those with Ephemerate and stuff, also fantastic. But, you know, this deck has been a lot of fun to play. I've played, again, quite a bit of the Orzhov build. I've played a little bit of the Esper builds, and I've been pretty impressed overall with it. If I wasn't playing Prowess or, you know, in paper, this would, or yeah, if I wasn't playing Prowess in paper, this would probably be the deck that I work towards building next. But yeah, that's going to do it for me this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Again, if you did, please leave a like on the video. Of course, leave a comment down below what deck you would like to see featured next in the Modern format, or maybe even Standard as well. Feel free to leave your thoughts down there, as well as checking out all the other content that you can find in the description down below. I do greatly appreciate you watching the video. Hope you all enjoyed it. I hope to see you all in the next one.